It's actually
Mr. President,
Senator from Oregon.
as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S. 823 introduced earlier today. The bill would provide for protection of recovery rebates. I further ask that the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Pennsylvania.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. My friend, the senator from Oregon, suggested that Senate rules precluded this provision from being addressed in the recently passed bill. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that. So let's remember how we got here. Last year, Republicans and Democrats worked together, and we passed 5 bills adding up to about $4 trillion, authorizing another several trillion dollars of loans. It was an extraordinary reaction to an extraordinary moment. And Republicans and Democrats came together time and time again. As the circumstances were changing, we passed new legislation to reflect that, passing a big bill, a $1 trillion bill nearly, in December. But as soon as our Democratic colleagues had the ability, they decided they weren't interested in any bipartisan legislation anymore. It was going to be strictly Democrats using the reconciliation process, and that is the only reason that this provision couldn't be addressed, because it can't be dealt with under the reconciliation rules. So now our Democratic colleagues perceive a problem with this legislation, and they'd like Republicans' consent to fix what might have been resolved with some kind of compromise had they pursued the path that we pursued when we were in control. But let's talk about where we are and what we've done for individuals and families. The unprecedented financial support from the federal government has been really amazing. An average family of 4 has by now received stimulus checks of $9,200, child tax credit checks of $6,000. That's $15,200. By the way, that's gone to people who never lost a penny of income. And if they did lose their job, as in the hypothetical that the senator from Oregon suggests, then the unemployment benefits in more than half the cases paid them more than they made working because of the legislation that we passed. We designed it so they would pay people more not to work than they would make working, in addition to these stimulus checks that they got. And so the result of that is, in the aggregate, personal savings have gone through the roof. It's up by over $1.6 trillion. Total consumer credit is down. The fact is, we more than replaced lost income through the series of bills that were passed. But now my colleagues want to come here and block a valid legal claim from being honored with some of this money. And specifically, they want to block these stimulus checks from being subject to garnishment. So what's a garnishment? That's just when money is withheld from someone because they owe something. They owe money that they haven't paid to someone else, and that someone else has gone to court, made the case, and it's been adjudicated that, yes, this is money that's owed. So they want to forbid this windfall, which in many, many cases, this is a windfall, let's be honest. They want to prevent it from being available to be used for the conventional way that we collect money that is owed. And who might this affect? Under this legislation, if it were to pass, it would forbid garnishment of the alimony payment that a needy former spouse relies on. That's a common expense for which garnishment applies. But in this case, the deadbeat former husband who's not paying his alimony payments, who forced his former wife to go to court to get a court order, he's been so far behind, now he gets this big check from the government, and she doesn't even get to catch up on the money that he owes her. How about the deadbeat dad who's not paying his child support? That's another situation in which the mom, trying to struggle to support those kids, had to go to court and get a court order that his future income would be garnished because he just doesn't pay. Well, he gets this check in the mail, compliments of the taxpayer, and he doesn't have to give her any of that? That's so terribly unfair. And, you know, in addition, all these direct payments, we've also provided massive financial support in all kinds of ways to alleviate expenses, like nutrition assistance, $80 billion, housing assistance, $65 billion, an increase of Medicaid, $170 billion. Not to mention almost $1 trillion in payroll support so that people could continue to work. When you pay for all of these things and you still give people money on top of that, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask people to pay their bills, especially their overdue bills to their former wife or to support their kids. Here's the other thing. At best, this is now a political statement because, as one of my colleagues just alluded to, these payments have already gone out the door. Most of them have. Treasury's already issued probably over $250 billion in these checks. And to the extent that a person was subject to garnishment, the garnishment happens automatically. So it's already happened. So what does that mean? If this bill passed, it's the legal chaos. I mean, first of all, it would actually allow the deadbeat dad that I'm referring to go back and claim that money back, to claw it back from the account that's meant to support his kids. How is that even possibly fair or reasonable? Mr. President, this is a bad idea, and for these reasons, I object.
President,
The objection is heard.
just briefly, I think the key kind of question, and the checks are still going out. We want them to get out as quickly as possible. But the key issue here is the Republicans back in December wanted to help that couple that I was talking about, the person laid off through no fault of their own. They wanted to help those folks to make sure their relief check wouldn't be seized to cover a child's outstanding hospital bills. And so what we heard is discussions about all kinds of, other issues. But the fact is, in December, just a few weeks ago, Republicans were supportive of the families Senator Brown and I are seeking to help today. That's what the question is all about. Will the Senate today help the folks who are hurting that Senator Brown and I have been talking about? In December, Republicans said, you bet we're going to be there. Now it's a question really of who the Senate is for. Senator Brown and I are for those folks who are hurting. They've been laid off through no fault of their own. And Republicans, unfortunately, with checks still going out, have decided they are for the private debt collectors. I think it really shows whose side you're on. And Senator Brown and I and the members of our caucus are on the side of people who are hurting through no fault of their own. And we especially care about them at this time when checks are still going out. I yield the floor.